Hey everybody, Kelly here. So a couple weeks ago I had gone on vacation, and while I was on vacation I actually took my computer along to do some patterns on EQ8. So I'm not extremely familiar with the program yet, but I'm starting to learn, and so was starting to learn to basically design a couple of different patterns. And one of the ones that I had started with was actually a pretty simple block style pattern. And so I'll show you the picture there. So just a really quick image of the pattern there. And because I was on vacation, I couldn't remember exactly what fabrics I had for this particular design that I was thinking of. And so what I have here is actually items that I got in, well, so this is a 5-yard cut that I got from Sew Yeah. But the rest of this is actually scrap pieces that I got in a couple of bags and boxes. Well, actually just one bag and I think one box that I ordered from them for scrap bags. And so I actually got some pretty good size cuts for them being from a scrap bag. And in fact, this one here, I'm pretty sure is at least a yard, if not a yard and a half. And that's actually going to be my next thing here, is not 100% sure that I have enough for the pattern that I've designed. So normally you would kind of test this out before coming onto a video and just starting to cut up the fabric and etc. You'd have it all planned out. I don't necessarily have it all planned out, so not 100% sure how this is going to go. But yes, in the past when I've done, when I've been going to give you guys a pattern, I tried to test it out with another quilt first, but I haven't done that in this case, so we're kind of winging it here. And also because I didn't know, I couldn't remember exactly what colors I had taken a picture of a couple of them, but I couldn't remember what all I'd stuck in the pile. And so because I couldn't remember what all I'd stuck in the pile, I wasn't really able to put the exact colors in the exact, so like I knew I had this color, but I wasn't sure about all the other prints. So I just kind of stuck in what I thought I had. So now what I'm going to do is actually go through and figure out what colors I've got, what I've got the most of, and what I can put into this block and actually make work. And hopefully have some scraps left for something else. But yeah, so I have basically a yard of a couple of these and about a half yard of some of them. And actually, now that I think about it, I take it back. It wasn't all from Sew Yeah Scrapbags. At least one of these, which I think might be the 5-year cut I did get from Sew Yeah. At least one of these I picked up while I was traveling. Pretty sure it was this one. I don't know. I probably told y'all in a video from a couple weeks ago when I got back, but I think it was that one. Because some of these are actually, well, they're all well, nope, they're not all primitive gatherings. There's one in here that's, I think, from Songbook. But they're mostly primitive gatherings, and they're from Lisa Bonjean's Urban Gatherings collection and her Rustic Gatherings collection. So they're a little bit of both of those. But they're all from Primitive Gatherings, which is Lisa Bonjean. So, and these three are from Urban Gatherings. I could make a quilt out of this right here, actually. But I kind of like the block that I have here and want to do some different colors in it. So I'm going to sit down and kind of recolor it, and we'll go from there. I've got my design pulled up here, as I said before, I don't necessarily know that I have all of these colors, and in fact, actually, I probably have more than these colors, but I just wanted to get something put into the blocks before, and then I would come back home and see what all fabrics I had and get them slotted in once I knew exactly what it was that I had. So before I do that though, I'm actually going to write down some different sizes for blocks to make sure that I have the right amount of fabric for the colors that I'd like to put in. So like basically what I'm going for is I think I'm going to want to change this particular block right here to a darker color because I have a gray, gray, and gray. I'd rather this be a darker color here on the corners. Well, not quite the corner, but... And so that will be probably one that I will change. And then I'll leave these grays and leave all the other ones the same. So basically, from here, if I had a quilt full of different blocks, I could print out the patterns or print out the rotary cutting information for each of the blocks. But in this particular one, this is actually a block style quilt. And so each of these, as I move around, you'll see the different highlights. Each of these will actually be a different block of its own. And so when I go to the rotary cutting, I have to select on a specific block and then go to the rotary cutting, and then it will print out cutting information for that particular block. So I'm not expert at this yet, so if anybody knows something different, please let me know. But so far what I know is that for each of the blocks in this particular quilt, because again, as I said, it's a block style, it's a single block, but EQ8 kind of puts them like each section as a block of its own. And so then it gives me the cutting instructions for each of those blocks. Well, all I really need to know is that it's this color right over here, and that I need one patch of the size 10 3/16. That's pretty simple and not really worth me printing out this printout right here, especially in color. It's nice to have the color image, but I don't necessarily need to print it out in color ink and waste my color ink because it's pretty expensive. So basically for that particular fabric there, all I need to know is that I need a block that's 10 3/16. So I am going to write that down, and I'm going to write down that I would actually like it to be in one of the darker fabrics. So I'm just going to write that on my piece of paper here, and I'm then going to go to each block and highlight each one and write what size I'm supposed to cut. And so for that one, I actually think, that's funny, because I actually think I was supposed to cut 4 altogether. I don't know why that didn't tell me that. That's interesting. Now I need to go back and look. Although no, that's right, because it's going to give me 4 pieces. So let me look at it here. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Although there should be 8 pieces. Huh. I think I'm going to need to do some editing here. That really is odd. So basically it's going to need 2 patches, 10 3/16. Huh. That is really strange. And this is where I think maybe I should just print them all out. But it feels like a waste, so for right now I will just put ×2 and go on to the next one. So this white piece right here, the striped piece, I have it in 2 different spots, but if I click on this block right here, it should just be giving me the cutting for this one, this 2, 3, and 4. And then this is going to be different cutting instructions. So let's preview that. See, and it should give me 4 pieces right there, and it's also going to be 10 3/16 in one patch. Alright, so just writing this down here. Top 1. Okay. And then continuing with the white stripe, if I click on this one here, it should give me instructions for, see, I don't know why it's just giving me 1 patch. I need 4 patches. Let me see here. 9 11/16 width by 5 inches high, 135-degree arc, 45-degree arc. That's actually one of the things I don't like about EQ8 is I want it to give me the stitch and flip instructions. I'd prefer not to actually cut it as a just rather not cut it that way. I don't know. Then again, if I make this into a block of its own, just like this, that would be why I cut it that way. Okay. Because I can see that you probably sew this. Excuse me, sorry. Sew on this triangle. Nope, actually you sew this 4 patch. Sew this all together as a block. Sew this all together as a block. Sew these 3 pieces together. Sew on the triangle. Sew on the triangle. Sew this all together. Sew all this as a block. Okay. Getting myself a little confused here. Okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and continue writing my sizes, my cutting sizes, and we'll come back and do some cuts, and then we will start to sew and hope for the best. And if all else fails, we'll turn it into a super scrappy quilt. Well, here's what I think my cutting instructions are, so I'm just going to get started on the center block, which is really just, it starts with a 4 patch for the center. So 6 7/8 inch squares for both of those prints. The center block actually only requires 2 of each of the prints, but then there are 2 other of each of the prints throughout the quilt, so I'm going to go ahead and cut them right now. So 6 7/8 inches. Alright, so I'm changing up my pattern just a little bit, but I think this is what I'm going to go with as far as the black blocks running down and the white blocks going across. And then the only pieces that I have left to cut, I'm actually going to go ahead and cut the white pieces first. So the top and bottom and the side white pieces. And then I need to figure out which gray I'm going to use for the corners here, and then which gray I'm going to use for the actual 4 outside corners. So I'm hoping maybe one of these prints will actually be slightly darker than it is here on the computer. So I may need to find something a little different, but that kind of gives you the idea of the cuts at least that I need to make. But yes, I would like to have a bit more definition between these two prints right here and then the outside print there. Actually, these two are the same fabric style. I just would like to have more definition between this gray, and that gray. Sometimes on the computer it just doesn't show up very well, but then when you actually cut them out of the actual fabric, so for instance, this right here is the white. I mean, that actually is that fabric print when I pulled it. When I pulled the JPEG files, that is actually the white fabric. But it sure doesn't look like it on here, does it? So, alright. I'm going to go ahead and start cutting my outside white blocks, and then I will pick the other two. Alright, so the white fabrics are working against the black in the top and the bottom, but since this print right here is actually very white, I think I'm going to try putting in a black print on the sides. I don't know if it'll be that one though. Let's see. What else have I got on here? This is the one. This is the main one for the black squares. But I also have it for the border, so I don't know if that's what I'll actually end up going with, but I think that's going to stand out much better. It may not look all that different here on my design on the computer, but I think it'll really stand out much better on the actual print because those blocks in the center are so light. It'll be good to have something else bordering it that isn't another white. But I think I will probably try to figure out a different black fabric than what I'm going to put around the border. Alright, so far the only thing that wasn't Primitive Gatherings fabric up there was the rust, which I think was Songbird, I believe it is. All of a sudden I can't remember myself. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Songbook might be what it was. By Moda. And is it Fancy That Design House? So anyhow, that's the only one that isn't by Primitive Gatherings up there. But I'm actually have gone ahead and changed in my design and added this color in on these triangles. That's because I didn't have this particular fabric right here. So I think that's actually the fabric that I'm going to use to put in on the side pieces here. And I don't know if my camera's going to show it very well because it's kind of dark. But it's actually a kind of a more peachy tone. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that and I'll slide it in there and we'll take a look. Okay, well, a larger piece was just a little bit short of being able to cut a 10 and 3/16 inch square. So I'm going to try my little trick again and use one of these to try to cut out 4 pieces out of this smaller piece. So let's see, remind myself. All of a sudden, why am I not thinking right? Once again. You ever have that problem where you use different rulers at different times and start thinking differently because of the different styles of rulers? Make sure I'm not about to cut my other fabric. Making sure I'm lined up with it and not about to cut into it. Okay. And we are down to the outside corners. Well, the outside corners of the initial block, since this is a block quilt. And then I will actually figure out the borders. But for now, I just need to get my 4 corner pieces. So cutting off the selvage. And I need a block that is 9 7/8 inches. So, actually I need 2 blocks that are 9 7/8. Oops, and I dug in just a little bit there, but I tell you what, I will trim it again in just a minute. Actually, let's trim it right now. There, now I can go a little bit better. Nine 7/8, huh? Well, for the moment, I'm going to go with 10 inches. That way, the extra bit here will actually be a 10-inch piece. I'm just going to go ahead and cut the hole. You know what? I should have left it folded up. Sorry, sometimes I take a little while because I just wasn't thinking. So cut it to a 10-inch piece. I'm going to use my mat to cut it because I don't have a 10-inch ruler handy. And if I'm a little bit short, that's okay, because I was really supposed to go for 9 7/8 inches anyway. Okay, and I get a straight cut here on the edge. Actually, back it up here and line it up with my mat too, just to be sure. Yep. Alright, so 9 7/8. Okay, well, let's get a 10-inch square first and we'll go from there. And actually 9 7/8. So about halfway in between the dashes on my mat. I know most people say don't go by the mat, but I kind of figure as long as most everything I've cut goes by the mat, it'll be fine. These are going to be the outside corners anyway, so I'm going to cut them slightly oversized, and then I'll just be able to cut them down. Okay, that's an extra piece. And then, so you can see here, I'm already kind of short of the line on my mat. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim it just a tiny bit. More on that side than on this side, actually. I can see way more of the line right here than I can over here. Okay, so not exactly precise, but close, pretty close. And alright, I'm lined up on the bottom, and I'm going to cut corner to corner, and then I will have 4 9 7/8 inch pieces. Or not really, I'll have 4 pieces of whatever length they're supposed to be. It was just that I needed to cut it out of 9 7/8. So I think my piece is actually supposed to be, honestly, it's probably supposed to be like 13 13/16 or something like that. I'll have to look on my computer again. My battery actually went dead, but before it went dead, I knew that I needed to cut a 9 7/8 inch block and cut it in half. That I needed 2 of them actually, but alright. Alright, well, for right now, the center 4 square is sewed together, but everything else is just kind of stuck up there. So once it gets all sewn together, the top will shrink up just a little bit. So I could leave it as a wall hanging and just bind it, but I am going to turn it into a larger size quilt. So now I just have to think about what I want to do for the borders. And I've got lots of scrap left. I've got a couple of 1-yard pieces, actually 3 1-yard pieces, I think a 2-yard piece and a 3-yard cut. So I've got plenty for doing the borders and the backing. I just need to sit down and think about what I want to do here. I'm kind of leaning toward maybe doing a gray background right, or a gray border right away out of this larger cut, and just doing some, 3 or 4 inch gray border, and then actually doing like a piano key border. I just think I would want to border the piano key border as well, and I'm not sure what I would want to use for that because none of my other cuts are long enough to not have to piece, not have to piece the border strip. So the only one that I have that's long enough is that light gray right there. So it's going to be a very scrappy border, but I got to sit down and think about what exactly I want to do. I've thought about maybe 5-inch squares and then a piano key, like a small strip, and then some 3 or 5-inch squares in white and black, and then maybe another small strip, and then doing a piano key border. I don't know. That actually is something that I probably will work up on EQ8 because I just can't picture it in my head right now. But anyhow, I have even thought about just making this into a wall hanging because I like it just the way it is too. But I'm kind of going for a full quilt here, so I'm going to get started working on sewing these pieces together, and hopefully you can hear me over the sound of the exhaust fan. I'm sorry I can't really do anything about it, so hopefully it's not too bad. But anyhow, these pieces right here are actually going to be a little bit complicated. Really not that bad, but if you're a new quilter, they're not super easy, but what you need to do here, so how this particular one is going to be, it's actually reversed for one thing. So let me turn it around. So this is the bottom piece, and it goes actually so that the black is like a diamond, and then this piece comes off of the side. So what I want to do here is, if I just lined up this corner to this corner, I would end up being too short, 1/4 of an inch short. Because, so if I just lined up this piece to that piece, and then I have just a little bit of a tail on the gray piece right down here, and then if I sew my 1/4 of an inch, let me go ahead and pretend I'm sewing in my 1/4 of an inch seam there, and then when I flip this back, you'll see, well, you would have seen if I could have held it still. So if I line them up just right, and then so I'm going to come in and be short right here. So what I want to do is actually pull my black block about 1/4 of an inch over the point for the gray one. And then when I sew it down, it will actually end up being straight across. So let me go ahead and do that here. Now, if you're really new to this, you should measure. I know my 1/4 inch pretty well. I say that, and then I'll probably get this done and realize I'm just a little bit off, but we'll see. So then I've got my diamond going, and then the piece coming off from that at an even point there. So now I just need to iron this down and do the same with the other side. Okay, well now I have to do a tricky one. So I need to get these two patches onto here so that they meet up and sew on like that. So what I'm gonna do is actually line up my pale peach here in my gray. Try to line up on this side. And then when I get right down to here, right into there, I will actually tug this over and start sewing it to the black. So this is going to get a little bit complicated here, but some pins might help too. Actually, honestly, I can sew this first part pretty easy. Okay, and then I just have to kind of feel under here to make sure it's all lining up correctly. Actually, do just a couple more stitches here. I think I'm not quite there. Well, actually, all of a sudden I think I forgot to go. I think I was not supposed to line up the end. Let me see. I feel like I'm going to stretch this other side. That's not good. Well, let's take a look here. Not sure I'm going to get that right. Nope. Ugh. Okay, time for some seam ripping. Not sure where I... So I started out with my 1 block quilt, which could have been a wall hanging. I could have just stopped with the block. But I wanted to put on a 3.5-inch border, and I wanted to make this quilt an awful lot bigger. So I could have stopped with just the block. I could have stopped when I put on the 3.5-inch border and made it a wall hanging. Either one of those. But I wanted to make it much bigger, so I also put on a piano border. So I had a lot of scraps left, so I did 2.5 by 9.5 in length. I did 21 pieces for each of the 4 sides, because this is square. So for each of the 4 sides, I did 21 2.5 by 9.5 inch pieces, and then I actually cut in a cornerstone on all 4 corners. Sorry, it kind of looks this way right now. I just wanted to prop the extra border on there before I actually sew it all together and get an idea of what it's going to look like. So I do wish that I had a 5-yard cut in one of the darker colors, but I had a 5-yard cut in the gray, and so I used the gray and the 5-yard cut so that I didn't have to piece my borders together. I like it well enough, but I think the black would have looked much better against the gray tones here. But it would have also blended in with these. So I probably would have come up with something else for these particular triangles right here. But since it was the gray that I was going to use, these triangles actually stand out okay. I also kind of wish that I had maybe had a smaller piece of one of the darker fabrics for the cornerstones. I think it's going to end up looking okay when I get the actual outside borders on, but I kind of wish that it stood out just a little bit more on the corners. But I like it. I still like it. I just think color-wise it would be better if I had another black on the corners. But, you know, those are the things that I kind of see that I wish I could change, but I don't really have enough fabric of a similar style to be able to do that. And so I'm okay with these ones. I think they're still very pretty. So, and once I get the border on, it'll be fine. Alright, to go over my cuts again for the block, just for anybody that would like to try to do this layout. I will try to put it in the description below, but to try to go over it quickly, the black blocks right here and the white blocks right here, so there's 4 of each 6 7/8 inch square. The songbook fabric, the rust, 2 9 7/8 inch squares cut in half for the 4 corners. Alright, so then the triangles. So the white stripe, I actually had to have 2 blocks that were 10 3/16 inches cut in half. So the darker fabric for the corners, again, I had to have 2 blocks, 10 3/16 inches cut in half. The flower print here, this is actually, I think, from the Sherry and Chelsea line titled Emma, I think it was. So I was telling you, this was not most of this is the same collection from Primitive Gatherings, but this was something from Songbook, and this was from Emma. I think that's the one. I'm not 100% sure. I know it's a Sherry and Chelsea. So I needed 8 pieces of that. So I needed 4 squares cut 10 3/16 inches and then cut in half. For these cuts right here, so I got 2 of the same, 2 of the same, and then 4 of the white stripe. So for those, they needed to be 9 11/16 from point to point. And then it's a 45-degree angle cut. The outer block was 9 7/8 inch square, 2 squares cut in half. The borders, I believe, equaled 38 by 38, and they were 3.5 inch strips. From there, I actually had 21 2.5 by 9.5 inch pieces for the piano border, and like I said, I added the cornerstones. And then I'm going to put on a 5-inch border for the outside, and I am going to bind it in the black. So I think this is going to look better once the binding's on too, that it'll pop on the outside of it. So alright, well, I think that's about all I have to say for measurements and all that. And I may need to edit this down some. And now I need to get to sewing to finish it up. 9 7/8. Oh, sorry.